referring to
the papers of my wife right now in your office in Manila. Because they're stating that she got only 45 days to submit all the information to your office. So right now, she received the paper dated on May the 3rd, and she received it on May the 15th, so which is almost 45 days tomorrow, right? So we have 1 day in Manila. So I don't know what's gonna happen, and I emailed them for extension, which they're not responding. And I told her to drop a letter in your office, and she's not receiving any call or a letter from your office. That's what my question is. Thank you.
Well, you know, again, in order to ensure that we have efficient processing, we try to give in order to try to ensure efficient processing, we try to give people what we would consider to be a reasonable amount of time within which to provide information into our office. I think what I'd suggest in your case, if you want to give me the details of your wife's name, date of birth, when I go back to the office, to the Philippines. What a coincidence. Okay, all right.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I proceed, please note that we will not ask personal questions. If you have individual questions, you can ask Mr. Nick Oosterveen or Mr. Bento later. It is just a general questions that it occurs in every one of us, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Ron Canterbury with the Filipino Journal. My question, very general. You guys mentioned and talked about the staffing levels at the Philippine Embassy. You indicated that there's Philippine staff and there's also Canadian staff. Is there a strategy in place by the provincial nominee program to have a specific person in place to handle and process provincial nominee applications? In so much as almost like a trade desk, like the virtual trade services in the Philippine Embassy?
Well, you know, I can start. For the longest time, we didn't really have enough, probably, provincial nominee cases to warrant having a distinct unit. We had an individual who was responsible for that. But over the course of the next few months, the numbers are increasing, and we know that they're going to continue to increase. So what we're going to establish is a dedicated unit of individuals that will be dealing only with provincial nominee cases, because what's important is not only the capacity to process cases, but to have a single point of contact so that a provincial representative, if inquiring about the status of a case, can know who it is that they have to deal with. And so that's something that we're going to be setting up over the course of over the summer, so over the course of the next 2 to 3 months.
Not too much to add to that, except I think you put your finger on something that at this point there's no definite plan in place for something like that. But how we best do the things that Nick's talked about, good single points of contact, best use of resources at a time when all the provinces are increasing their activity on the provincial nominee side and increasing numbers are flowing over from the federal skilled worker side to the provincial nominee side. What are the best solutions in terms of combining federal and provincial resources? These are very much topics under consideration. There's not one great solution, and it'll probably be a different approach depending on specific visa offices.
Thank you, sir. I hope that that answered your questions. But for more information, as I've said, you can approach them later. Next, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Aglugup. I'm the former MLA for the Maples. Good afternoon, gentlemen, Mr. Rappel, Mr. Oosterveen. That was certainly a very nice presentation and information for us to be able to digest today. But I would like to direct my question to Mr. Oosterveen here. I've done a lot of representation on behalf of my constituents in the Maples over the last 8 years, and certainly the provincial nominee program has been very helpful, because if there was a problem, all I do is call up the minister, and everything gets in action. But anyway, my question to Nick is, when an application is submitted to the provincial nominee program, these are already pre-screened, and I suppose all the documents and the whatever information is already verified. Now, and that takes about, I have two questions. My question to Ben is, is the general stream part of it. The general stream is taking too long. Why are you even putting a general stream when you don't have time to process all that application? That's my question to Ben. My question to Nick is, why, when an application gets into the embassy already, it's already pre-screened for the provincial nominee side of things, why is it taking too long for your for the embassy to process that application, when in fact you have to verify three things: security, medically fit, and educational preparation? That's my question.
Sure. Nick's kindly offered to let me go. There we go. Nick's kindly offered to let me go first. I'm not sure why. I think he's just happy that somebody else for a change is getting asked about processing times. And it is interesting as our programs grow that some of our issues are become more and more shared issues. I'll let Nick deal with his piece of the question, but the general stream is does have a slower processing time than our priority streams. I think one of the things, well, we have to see the provincial and the federal programs working together in a complementary way. We don't have an interest in duplicating what the other does. We seek to deliver from where our strengths are. And the strengths of the Manitoba nominee program and the reason we have these agreements with the federal government is based on the recognition that the province is best placed to know the kinds of immigrants who are going to meet the economic needs of the province. That's why the province has its own criteria and why we have a role in the selection process. So it's not, our goal is to nominate those who are most likely to succeed economically in the province, and that's why our program gives priority processing to those best able to demonstrate. And those are our priority streams, and those are being processed in an average of 3 to 4 months. Our general stream applications are still a much longer processing time. The average is still 9 months. Some take longer, more than a year, because of incompleteness or for other factors. Others are going a little more quickly because they're going to a rural destination with some involvement by employers. But by and large, it is a longer processing time. With the staffing resources, and I think this is something Nick can probably, or most of our federal colleagues recognize, you can streamline your programs, you can look for efficiencies. There's always going to be a limit to the number of cases you can process in a year with the staffing resources you have. We are currently at a point where we feel we can with some more work on the streamlining side, nominate about 4,000 to 5,000 cases a year. We did 3,000 and some last year. We've added 3 new staff. We're hoping that we can, we're hoping we can reach that. In order to reach our targets, we need to be in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 a year. So, if we get most of those cases through our priority streams, that means we are nominating primarily those with the best potential to succeed in this province. We're doing our job. And last year, about 70% of our cases came out of the priority streams. The remainder coming out of the general stream. So it's a good question to some extent. Do we really need a general stream? It keeps our program, we felt initially, accessible to those applicants who may not have English language ability, maybe not in the priority age range, may lack post-secondary education or some other factor, or are new workers but have strong family connections here. But it's a good question. I'm not going to give an answer to it right now. It does keep our program accessible. It's a balance between accessibility and how large your inventory should be when there's a finite number of applications you can nominate each year. We continue to want to nominate those with the best potential to succeed in this province. And just as a segue over to what Nick is going to talk about, part of the issue with processing times is also that there's an expectation and I think a responsibility on the province to do as good a job as we can in screening, verifying, and going over the documents that we have to ensure that the documents going into the Federal Visa Office have been as thoroughly screened as possible. But there's also a limit. We're in Manitoba. The documentation is coming from half a world away or farther. And while we are doing a better job all the time in recognizing the types of employment and education and financial documentation which are questionable, we are cooperating to a greater extent with our federal colleagues all the time to increase our own knowledge and awareness of what the issues are. The federal visa offices are always best placed to have their finger on the pulse in a way and know what is going on in the source country and be able to catch those issues. And just in terms of the second part of the question, maybe I'll hand it over to Nick now to deal with that.
Yeah. So Chris, in terms of our own processing time for provincial nominee cases, as I indicated, we're looking at about 8 to 11 months. We get a lot of the cases processed within 4 months. Sometimes it's a question... stand right there. Sometimes it's a question of how quickly people are able to have their medicals completed and the results come into us. How quickly they can get their NBI certificates, so the National Bureau of Investigation certificates into us. So there's a responsibility on applicants as well. You know, when we discuss these with the processing times with provincial governments, the feeling is that that 8 to 11 month time frame is not unreasonable, particularly given all the work that needs to be done by someone in the Philippines who is going to, you know, leave their employment, liquidate their assets, and eventually move to Canada as well. But as I say, a large number of the cases we were able to get done within 4 months. Thank you.
General, it is in regards to you about my situation. My name is Leo Santos. I'm a nursing assistant here in Manitoba. And the way I look at it in your speech today, that you passed the message that in the length of time and effort for our co-Filipinos way back home, like in processing. Let's say if they applied as landed immigrant, permanent residents, how long does it take in their process? How many months?
Well, again, if they're applying through the provincial nominee program,
Not provincial.
so this is just someone putting in an application, it would be 4 to 5 years. You know, and as I say, that's not something I'm proud of, right? And that's not something that I'm suggesting is healthy or preferable. It's an indication in part of the level of interest that people have in coming to Canada. So we get literally flooded with applications, and we only have a certain ability to process those applications. So I say we can process about 7,000 applications a year, but I'm now getting 11,000 applications coming in. And so unfortunately, that backlog just continues to build. So 4 to 5 years.
So 4 to 5 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Gentlemen, my name is Ariel Mutiero. My question is, how professionals been processed and how long it will take? And the second question is, I got already one relative came here, but unfortunately he moved to Toronto. Can I still do some support from the next person? Thank you.
Okay, you might have to just explain your question a little bit more. So in terms of the first question, you're asking how long does it take for a professional person to be processed? Like a teacher? They would be in the same queue. It's first come, first served. So it's still that 4 to 5 year period of time. As I say, we make exceptions for individuals who have received a certified labor market opinion from Services Canada. If they were to say, we know there's not a Canadian available to do that job, we will accelerate the processing for that type of case, and we will accelerate the processing for a provincial nominee case as well.
It will be accelerated over here in Canada.
You're saying the individual is here now?
The assessment, what I mean?
The application is filed in the Philippines?
Yeah, what I mean is the credentials will be assessed over here.
The credentials will be assessed in the Philippines. Yeah, so but it's still a 4 to 5 year time period. Okay. So now your second question, you have a relative who came to Winnipeg
As a nominee, yeah.
as a provincial nominee, okay, and then went to Toronto. So I think this may be for my learned call.
Sorry, I think the question of him would be, how is his chances for sponsoring more relatives? Since his relative moved to
Okay. Just to follow up on the first part of the question, because I think there's two pieces to it. For certain professionals who are applying through the nominee program, we ask that a part of the credentials recognition process take place first. So a teacher we ask to apply through the Manitoba Teachers Society for a provisional recognition of their certificate, and then we would process them according to our normal processing times. But this means that they would have, in advance of their receiving their visa, a provisional recognition of their certification. What this allows us to do as a province is to know that we're nominating somebody with a good chance to be employable in Manitoba, instead of doing what I think has happened perhaps too often in the past, that people have been nominated on the basis of an occupation for which they may not be able to work in our province. So that's just to deal with that first part of that question. Now, in terms of the individual who comes to the province and doesn't stay, there are many reasons why. Fortunately, while I'm sure that many of us are aware of or have heard of cases like this, they're not as many as we would fear, but it does happen. And sometimes there's a different reason for each case, so often it's a case-by-case basis, and certainly that's how we look at any application that comes in. Part of what our officers do when they look at a file where a family is supporting a relative is to say, have you supported relatives previously? If so, where are those relatives now? Are they in Manitoba? Are they working? Are they successful? If not, why not? If something went wrong, what went wrong? Why? I can't give a blanket judgment to say that, if your relative left the province, you're never going to have another chance. And are responsible to look into is what has been the success rate of the relative support before. It's kind of the flip side of what I talked about at the beginning. We put a lot of emphasis on what you, the family, the community bring to the process. If it's not working, before we go ahead with another application, we need to have a good idea of why it happened, why it didn't work before, and why it will work again in the future.
Thank you very much, sir. Once again, I return to say, please make your question brief, because we have only limited time. We just had only 10 minutes left. So, direct the question at once, generally.
My name is Yolanda Saceda, and I think I'm going to direct both of you, especially maybe to Mr. Rempel. It's regarding my niece, who's a phys teacher, and I think she's been denied for her application, and I don't know if we have to reapply again, and how could we do this provincial recognition as a teacher to be able to be, prioritized for this kind of category? Thank you.
Okay, if you want the information for teachers is on our website, which is in our brochure. But if you want to see me after the presentation, I can give you a little more information. But in the case of,
excuse me, do you have to reapply again for the number?
What we're looking for teachers, yeah, if the decision was turned down, was refused last time, then you would need to submit a new application. What we're looking for from teachers is that they have had their credentials given a preliminary scrutiny by the Manitoba Teachers Society, unless the applicant can demonstrate, on the basis of their training and work experience, that they have transferable skills to an occupation that's roughly equal in skill level. So if you're a phys ed teacher but you've got other occupations that you could be qualified for and you wish to apply into that occupation, we would consider it. But the applicant needs to make that case in the application. An important piece of what we're trying to assess is not just the strength of the family support, but do we have individuals who are going to be employable in this province? And that's what the applicant needs to demonstrate.
Thank you very much. Has that answered your question? May I request everybody to please keep quiet when they are answering the question so that you're not going to repeat the same question.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Perla Habate and I'm the president of the Philippine Heritage Council of Manitoba. And as you know, we're celebrating Philippine Heritage Week this week. Last night we had an interesting evening, an exciting one. We welcomed the newcomers who've been here the last 2 years, but most of them came very recently, and we had about 91 of them show up for that evening. And we had several speakers addressing needs that we thought would be beneficial to them. And one of the persons who did a presentation was Cynthia Stewart from Immigration Citizenship. And in her presentation, she did describe all the interesting programs you have developed to meet the changing needs of the new type of immigrants that we're getting. My question is, because especially the entry program, I understand that it's a very helpful program for each one who comes to the province. But, you know, since our community is very responsive to these needs of their relatives and whoever it is that's coming that they need to help out, they're very eager to help them right away, and they assume the role of orienting them. And in that process, they miss out on a lot that the services that the government has prepared for them. Is there a way you can make it a requirement instead of just having it as an elective thing that they can or they may not participate in? Because the services, we're not, as a community, we haven't been very good in accessing the services that the government has prepared for new immigrants. They need some help in terms of making sure they go through that process and help them in settlement here in Manitoba. Thank you.
It's a good question, and I suspect Cynthia was answered that last night, and probably will do a better job of it than I will, but I'll do my best. I'm glad you recognize the strength of what a program like Entry has to offer. We know that, you know, these programs didn't always exist or exist in their current form, and it's natural for relatives and family members to want to extend as much orientation and other support to a newcomer after they arrive. But I do agree that these programs have a lot to offer in assisting newcomers to get rapid access to the labor market at an appropriate level. I'm not sure that we can make it a requirement unless we attach it to some other service. Before you can have this service, you need to go through Entry. And if that becomes a viable model, it might be looked at. My general inclination is to look at the carrot more than the stick approach. I think what we need to do is perhaps do a better job of communicating to our newcomers the value that these programs have. We need to get word back from those who've gone through the programs to their relatives and friends in the community that the program actually worked. It did help them get quicker access to a language program, an employment training program. And our experience is that positive word of mouth is sometimes the best contributor. But I take your point, and it's an important one. We need to do a better job of communicating the value of these services. One of the things we want to do, and we've explored with our federal partners in Ottawa, we want to talk more specifically with some of our partners in essential visa offices like Manila, is how do we do a better job getting some of this information to our nominees before they arrive, so they become prepared and aware that these services exist, and we don't have to find them after they get here and let them know.
Yeah, and further to that, right now there is a pilot project that exists in Manila, in Beijing, and in New Delhi, and it is through the Association of Canadian Community Colleges, and it's called it's the Canadian Immigration Integration Project, and it's to do exactly that. So at the point where we have a skilled worker that we are going to, that we have approved for immigration to Canada. We're issuing the medical instructions. That's the point at which we say, okay, now is the time for you to go and access this service so that you can determine what is the kind of certification that you're required to go to Canada, what are the professional associations that you should get in touch with, what are some of the job-seeking websites that are available to you, so that people can start the job search before they ever arrive in Canada. So the idea is you kind of take the Canadian border and you move it out to Makati. You ensure that people are thinking about what it's going to take to become successful in Canada before they ever arrive. And the reality in doing that is some people may actually decide as they do their investigation that maybe it's best that they don't come. You have some of those situations as well, because you do get individuals who can be disillusioned once they arrive here, and then they feel it's very difficult then to get on with their lives either in Canada or to go back to the Philippines.
Thank you.
Virginia Guillen. I'm the Executive Director of the Philippine Canadian Center of Manitoba. And my question is, the applicants from Manila or from the Philippines is increasing at an alarming rate. When we had the visit of the Canadian ambassador to Manila, Peter Suerland, he mentioned something about increasing the number of immigration officers in order to reduce the alarming number of backlogs that you have. Has that action taken place yet? Because we can help if you want to employ us. The second question is, anyone who has received an approval already of coming to Canada, how long does it take before they are called for a medical checkup? Because this seems to be an agony also on the part of some applicants. And I have heard that from some of the members of our community. And just to mention also that here at the Philippine Center, we try to ease the settlement process of the new immigrants. And so we have a monthly welcome to our new immigrants. And we try our very best to invite different speakers from social agencies, government agencies, to tell them how they can help in facilitating their process of settlement. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, that's very commendable. The work that the Philippine community does in welcoming newcomers, and in many respects, the community has a responsibility, just as the government has a responsibility, and individuals have responsibilities as well. So the question sometimes is, how do we work best together to make sure that we're maximizing the collective will and talent that we have. In terms of the staffing levels in our office, what we find is happening globally is that some offices find that their applications are going down, and other offices have applications that are going up. So our office in Beijing, our office in Hong Kong, those applications are dropping off. The applications in Manila, in the Philippines, continues to go up. So what the government has done is they've gone through a reallocation exercise for those resources to take them out of the offices where the volumes are dropping and put them in offices where the volumes are going up. So last summer we received an additional 9 staff, and we're getting an additional 4 staff this summer. So that's significant, and that's happening. In terms of when do the medical instructions go out? The medical instructions go out once a case has been approved. So if you're talking about a permanent resident application, it may have been in the queue. Now the provincial nominee, again, those are in effect pre-approved by the province. And so our responsibility then is really just to ensure that the medical and the criminality and security aspects of the case are met. So those are still areas that we consider to be statutory requirements. And so even though they've been approved by the province, we still have to go and make sure that, again, the health and the criminality aspects are in place. But those are things that we would get working on very, very quickly after an application's been received in our office. So once a file's been created, once it's been given a preliminary assessment by an officer, the medical the medical requirements would be going
There
up.
seems to be discrepancy from some people. Some are told within 4 months. Some people are still waiting, going 7 months to a year already.
Well, as I say, I mean, then they should be coming back to us, maybe through the province, to say, you know, we're not getting the kind of processing that we should be getting, because as I say, our expectation is we conclude those cases within 8 to 11 months. So if someone hasn't received a medical instruction, then clearly something may have happened in the transmission of that information. That's also possible. So they should do some follow-up.
Residential Tenancies Commission, I have one question for you, Nick. First of all, I admire you giving the positive sides of the Filipinos, that is being resourceful. My question is in terms of tourists. You're aware for the fact that when a Filipino comes as a tourist, as the needs arise, i.e. is death or sickness, don't the federal government anticipate some kind of leeways wherein perhaps these tourists could have a possibility to stay further because of the needs of the sponsoring or the relatives, things like that? I realize that they can extend the stay of the tourist, but eventually while the tourist stays here, and again, the families are very resourceful in many ways, approaching their MPs to do something wherein eventually this person becomes an immigrant to join the family. If there is something that you can do with that, or is there also a quota from the federal wherein it says perhaps 10 or 20 in each province will have this number to stay within that year. So if you can look into that, I think it would be a great process.
Again, I don't want to lead you astray. You know, I mean that's a very difficult request. Okay, because we need to be assured that when someone is applying to go to Canada as a visitor, even if it's an extreme situation, even if it's an urgent situation like an illness or a death in the family, there is still an expectation that they will eventually return to the Philippines. That's the whole purpose of giving someone a visitor status. If we felt that their true intention was to remain in Canada permanently, then there's every likelihood that the application would in fact be refused, and they would not even be able to come forward as a visitor. So they can receive extensions. I mean, normally these are individuals that they still have. I mean, they have a job to go back to, they have family to go back to. You know, so the expectation is that in fact they would return, and the whole process for coming to Canada permanently, I mean, it's a separate and distinct process. So they would have to go through that different track. So I don't want to leave you the impression that we're going to work on something because at this point I don't think there's any intention to work on something all in the line of what you're suggesting.
Thank you, and this is for you, Ben. A part of it was answered already, but in terms of provincial nominee, one part of it is that nominees should stay in the province, like an example a while ago, and I know it's a unique situation. Don't you think that right from the application there should be a clause which states stay in Manitoba for a certain number of years before they can move to another province? Thank you.
I think a lot of people, not just in Manitoba, I sit at some tables where a lot of the provinces get together, and I know would be interest if there was some sort of clause you could have that would require people to stay in the province of nomination. The reality is that when a permanent visa is issued, that permanent resident of Canada has the same rights under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms as any other permanent resident or citizen of Canada, and has the right to, and I think, you know, if we reflect on that a little bit as permanent residents and citizens of this country, it's a good thing, the freedom of movement, mobility. We would like people to be honest with us. I think that's the key requirement when you're applying through the provincial nominee program, you're applying through the government of Canada, there is a responsibility, an expectation, in fact, a legal requirement that applicants tell the truth on their applications, both to the province and to the government of Canada. And certainly we all want to be very vigilant as communities, supporting relatives, civil servants, that we are not allowing our programs to be abused. These programs exist for the benefit of all of us as Canadians. There's a difference between that and the individual who goes to a province with good intentions, things don't work out as quickly as they would like, or they receive an opportunity that's, you know, would be difficult or impossible to turn down, and for reasons, you know, like that, they end up having to move. Those are very different scenarios. So in the end, I go back, I guess, to the statement. I think as much as we'd like to have the stick to keep people here, our provinces are not prisons. They're hopefully regions of opportunity, and the better job we do in connecting newcomers with these opportunities, the less we'll have to worry about issues like those.
Thank you very much.
Linda Cantiveros, President of the Philippine Canadian Center of Manitoba. I have two things. Like, first is the additional information about the immigrant welcome. We are in the last stage of developing a Filipino newcomers resource guide, which we hope to print by the end of June, which we will give to the new immigrants, and that would include information about the entry program. Now for the question. In my other hat as interpreter for the Immigration and Refugee Board, there are some attempts of Filipinos to come in as refugee. This is to Mr. Nick Oosterveen, would you like to comment on, is that even a remote possibility of getting into Canada, given what you know about the political and other situation in the Philippines? Is there really a chance for a Filipino to be considered under that category? Thank you.
Well, again, personally I don't think so, but that's not going to stop people from trying. I think there are people that live in very, very, very difficult economic situations in the Philippines. I think there are a lot of people that have very, very little hope. They see very little opportunity for themselves or their families. And I think in the course of looking at all the possible options they have available to them, they will clutch at whatever straw they can, and refugee status being potentially one of them. I can tell you when we observe what a Filipino will do, even if they come to Canada legally and then eventually work illegally and they stay as long as possible, usually what happens once they're uncovered, they say, well, okay, I stayed as long as I could, and now I'll voluntarily go back. There are rare exceptions where people will try to extend that stay even further by claiming refugee status. Quite often it's not even because the individual may believe they genuinely have a claim to refugee status. It's quite often just a way to prolong their stay in Canada. Now, I should say too, we also have a group of Vietnamese residents who are in Palawan and who have been there for a long, long time. And the federal government has indicated that they would like these individuals to have their situation looked at on humanitarian grounds, not on the basis of refugee status, but more on the basis of humanitarian grounds, because the Philippine government will never, recognize them as refugees within the Philippines. So that's a very special, limited group of about maybe 100 individuals that the federal government is taking a look at.
Thank you very much, sir. Hope that
I'm the president of the Canadian Club. I have a question for Mr. Ben Remple. It's about the process of Manitoba nominee. If an applicant was being reviewed after, say, about 9 to 10 months and was found that there's an incomplete on the application, but it was assigned for a temporary file number, and it was the incomplete papers was submitted, does that particular applicant has to wait for another 9 months or 10 months, whatever the waiting period is, or is there any other process that make that applicant to make it speed up?
Okay, the question, yeah, it's about how we deal with incomplete applications and the documents that we request as they come in. We encourage applicants as much as possible. If you want fast processing time through either our provincial process or the federal process, put together a complete application. We've got, I think, reasonably clear and complete document checklists for both the provincial and the federal processes. You're going to save everybody a whole lot of trouble if you encourage your friends and relatives and contacts to be as complete as possible in submitting their applications. We have a somewhat forgiving approach with some of our applications where we feel there's a good potential for approval and only a few documents are missing. We will, at the discretion of the program officer, send out a request for those documents. And the option is always, if an application is too incomplete, we just send it back and say, sorry, you know, here's the checklist, get it complete next time. But occasionally when there's only a few documents missing, we feel there's good potential for approval, we'll send out a request for those documents and usually give the person 60, 90 days to get those in. As long as those documents are received within that time frame, and we're even a little bit forgiving about that, but don't tell anybody outside this room, we will, the application will then be, the status will change and it will come up for assessment on the next file assignment. We sign files out to officers about every 2 weeks. And so it should be next in the, you know, it should come, it doesn't have to go back to the end of the queue, is what I'm saying. It's now, once the documents are coming in, it's coded as ready for assessment, complete, and then it's queued for...
Which will take for how long?
Well, it depends on the stream of the application. If it's a priority stream application, it should be, again, coming up within 3 to 4 months. If it's a general stream, it's going to take a little longer.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I have to make this brief. I have a relative who applied as a teacher. And according to the list of demands and educations that an applicant could apply, I think she was very qualified because she had been teaching for 12 years as an elementary school teacher, and she had passed the teacher examination back in the Philippines. However, when her application was sent to the provincial nominee office, she was directed to send her application to Russell School Division to have her credentials approved. And it says there that she has to she should have taken some courses at the university or any schools here that has teacher training and have her credentials approved by that school division. So how did it happen? This education job that was also listed, one of the listed skilled workers or occupations in demand in Manitoba, I just can't figure out why she was directed to get her approval from school division of Russell. Why?
In terms of the details of the specific case, if I'd be happy to, you know, direct your question to the officer who looked at that case, and they can maybe go over some of the specific details for that case. For the policy itself, I think your example kind of points to the reasons for that policy. We don't want to be nominating, and I guess in some senses falsely encouraging people to come here thinking they're going to get work in their occupation when they're not. I can't decide who gets to teach in Manitoba. There's a certification body which is charged with that responsibility. The office is located in Russell, but it's not the Russell School Division. It's the Manitoba Teachers Society that's responsible for that. And we want them to take a look at the documentation in advance so that that individual knows that if they're successful in getting a nomination, if they're successful in getting a permanent visa from Manila, that they have a reasonable possibility for finding work in their field, as opposed to avoiding the disappointment of thinking, yes, I am a teacher in the Philippines, therefore I should be a teacher in Manitoba, and they end up having to take an office job or something like that. The system isn't 100%, it's not foolproof. We can talk with a specific officer about the details, but that's the reason for the policy.
Thank you very much, sir. And last but not the least,
thank you very much to you, Nick, for giving us the enlightenment about this Canadian way. It is the employers who pay, not the employees. Bear that in mind. Okay, the second, I have a question to Mr. Ben Rempel, because it has come to my attention that some Filipino Canadians who went to the Philippines claiming that they are consultants. I don't know if you have approved on that. That they give seminars in different provinces in the Philippines. I don't know if Nick is also aware of that. And some are my family, my friends, that has mentioned to me that they are going to one province, and if they go to that seminar, they pay 2,500 pesos each. So I just want to hear from you if you have allowed that.
That's an excellent question, perhaps a good one to kind of wrap up on, and I'll say a few words about Manitoba's perspective, and then let Nick have the last word in terms of what he sees on his side in the Philippines.